evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. In Moscow and Beijing today, the world's two communist giants were each turning a page of history. First about the Soviets. Against a backdrop of fierce debate inside the Kremlin, Soviet leader Gorbachev summed up 70 years of Soviet communism with a speech on the anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. He took a hard look at the Soviet past, including Stalin, and he lit into critics who have questioned his program trying to reshape the Soviet economic future. Wyatt Andrews is in Moscow.
Gorbachev's first direct response to his critics amounted to a counterattack. He said, those who say our reforms don't move fast enough should know we can't do it all at once. Gorbachev claimed overwhelming popular support for his reform program known as Perestroika and called Perestroika irreversible.
Conservative forces will seize upon any difficulty in a bid to discredit Perestroika and provoke dissatisfaction among the people. We should learn to spot, expose, and neutralize the maneuvers of the opponents of Perestroika.
Behind Gorbachev sat the Politburo member who had complained, Moscow party chief Boris Yeltsin. In an extraordinary news conference Saturday, a top Communist Party secretary confirmed Yeltsin had threatened to quit because he was unhappy with the pace of reform. Gorbachev was not just tough on his critics. In a speech designed to review 70 years of Soviet socialism, he delivered the most bitter public condemnation yet of the purges under Joseph Stalin. Stalin gave us industrialization, Gorbachev said, but also suffering.
The guilt of Stalin and his immediate entourage is enormous and unforgivable.
Whatever the opposition to Gorbachev, today, typically, he shoved it aside. It's clear from his speech, Gorbachev now considers himself to be the same kind of visionary as Vladimir Lenin, and that he, Mikhail Gorbachev, plans to lead the second Russian Revolution, just as Lenin led the first. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Moscow.
Now about the Chinese also beginning a new era today. They installed a whole new generation of communist leaders committed to radical change. John Sheehan reports from Beijing.
The winds of change blew through China today with the election of a new Politburo and a leading reformer, Zhao Ziyang, as head of the Communist Party. Zhao was handpicked to carry on the pragmatic policies started by his predecessor, 83-year-old Deng Xiaoping. The old-style communists who opposed rapid change are gone from the leadership. At a press reception that was more like a rousing wedding than a political event, Zhao strolled around fielding tough questions such as whether he will allow more freedom of dissent.
There is freedom of dissent in China, but not absolute freedom.
In the unprecedented give and take with reporters, Zhao was even asked whether his dapper suits are foreign-made.
All my suits are made in China, and all of them are very beautiful.
The decisive victory of the reformers came after Zhao blamed the Communist Party itself for leaving China a backward and poor country. The majority, he said, more than 700 million people, are farmers trying to eke out an existence without machines. The new Chinese socialism under Zhao will include more free markets like this one, some privately owned homes, and some factory workers paid on a piecework basis. More special economic zones will be set up to attract foreign partners who have money and modern technology. The Communist Party will be separated from government and from the management of factories. If all that works, Zhao Ziyang estimates that China will catch up with the developed world sometime in the middle of the next century. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
A can't-miss bestseller came out today in the Soviet Union, and whether it's a bestseller in the United States or not, it came out here too, with the Soviet ambassador busily pushing American editions of Mikhail Gorbachev's new book. It's called Perestroika, New Thinking for Our Country and the World. In it, Gorbachev is critical of the Soviet economic system, but he writes that his goal is to improve communism, not abandon it. What we're seeing from Moscow and Beijing today, the new thinking, the self-criticism, the calls for big change, is sweepingly new in the communist world. Bob Schiefer is here with a look at where it's coming from and what it may mean. Well,
Dan, all of this is just the latest sign of the enormous changes that leaders in both these communist countries have been trying to bring about, and if there is one thing that the experts agree on here, it is this. These proposals represent major differences in how communist governments operate. How major? Listen to Sovietologist Stephen Cohen of Princeton.
50 years ago in the Soviet Union, people were daily executed for thinking what Gorbachev now says. 5, 6 years ago, people in the Soviet Union were arrested, dissidents, for making the same criticisms that Gorbachev makes today.
It is just as much a sea change in China, where Mao imposed a communist system in 1949, and where even 10 years ago people were tortured for harboring Western economic ideas.
There are more changes in China as of now than in the Soviet Union. China is further advanced in its reform program, and I think the conditions in China for reform are more favorable than in the Soviet Union.
Since World War II, U.S. policy has been based on the premise that the communist and capitalist worlds would always be at odds. But if Soviet and Chinese leaders really are rethinking some of their basic economic principles, how should the United States respond?
Above all, the West should show restraint. These countries, both the Soviet Union and China, are turning their attention inward. This generation of Soviet leaders, Gorbachev's for example, is seeking its generational destiny at home.
But there is an edge to it, and experts warn that what we're seeing are attempts to change economic systems, not political systems.
Many people feel, well, Gorby, he couldn't be too bad, and he's a European, and he's going to become a capitalist democracy. No way, no way.
It's essential that reform in the Soviet Union be accompanied by real changes in foreign policy, or it doesn't do us much good.
And as several experts told us today, these changes should be encouraged by the West, but at the same time, these are major undertakings that cannot be accomplished overnight, and above all, should not be seen as miracle potions that will resolve all the problems between the East and the West. Dan?
Not, Bob, one would judge, not by a long shot. Thanks. For the fourth time in 2.5 months, an American warship opened fire in the Persian Gulf today. The Pentagon said the U.S. frigate Carr was escorting an American cargo ship when a small boat approached, not far from an island Iran has used as a base for hit-and-run attacks. The Carr fired warning shots, then opened up with its .50 caliber machine guns, and the attack boat turned back. It was not known if it was hit. No Americans were hurt. A spokesman for President Reagan attempted to play down the whole incident, calling it, and I quote, a warning situation. A recent shooting incident in the Gulf turned up evidence that Iran has gotten hold of some more U.S. military hardware, this time some of the best, Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. Reportedly, the Iranians got these missiles from U.S.-backed Muslim rebels in neighboring Afghanistan. But exactly how they got them is not clear. Tom Fenton has been working the story.
These Afghan resistance fighters admitted to CBS News that some of the Stinger missiles they received from the U.S. ended up in the hands of the Iranians. It happened 5 months ago along the Afghan-Iranian border.
The Iran army they captured our convoy.
Din Mohammed, their deputy leader, said his group was ambushed by Iranians who confiscated their equipment, including a number of Stinger missiles. Stinger batteries and packing material like this were recently found by the U.S. Navy in the Gulf, on board Iranian Revolutionary Guard boats that fired on a U.S. helicopter. These Afghan fighters now have more American Stingers, and there are doubts about their story. A Pakistani newspaper says the ambush was staged, and the Iranians paid the Afghans $1 million for up to 20 of the highly accurate shoulder-fired missiles. The Afghans deny receiving any money, but in the Pakistani arms bazaars along the Afghan border, there are persistent reports that Iranian agents are trying to buy the missiles. The Iranians claim they have now acquired many more Stingers and are ready to use them against American forces in the Gulf. There was a debate about the wisdom of giving such sophisticated weapons to the Afghan resistance when the U.S. began the secret program a year ago. Up to 1,000 have already been delivered and have proved to be highly effective against the Soviets. Soviet planes in Afghanistan are now forced to fly above 10,000 feet. In this instance, they flew so high their bombs missed the targets by more than a mile. The irony is that the Stingers could end up being just as effective in the hands of the Iranians. Tom Fenton, CBS News, London.
And still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, reports from correspondent Rita Braver about the gathering conflict of interest storm around President Reagan's new Supreme Court nominee, Susan Spencer on the advertising of drugs only your doctor can give you, and from Frank Courier in Hinckley, Illinois, where a jack-o'-lantern came crashing through the kitchen ceiling.